I'm super excited today to be here with my friend Evelyn Levenson, known as the Empowered Projector, and she is gracious enough to come and tell us her human design story, which I think everyone, whether you're a projector or not, will find some empowering tips and little bits from her story. So I met Evelyn. I know I heard you present at last year's conference, and I might have met you at the one before, right? Yeah. So everybody here, if you've been listening to these stories, you'll know there's a lot of cool people you meet at conference, and Evelyn will actually be presenting again at this year's International Human Design Conference, but more of that later. Anyway, Evelyn is going to tell us a little bit about her story and how human design found her, I think, more than you found it, right? How that has really transformed your life. And hopefully a lot of you will find golden nuggets in there. So I invite you to just tell us wherever you want to start, Evelyn.
Okay, great. So yeah, right now I love using human design to help people. And I find that human design makes a huge difference in helping people to not only know who they are, but feel better about themselves and trust themselves more. I think those are two of the things that are just so consistent through readings and empowerment of people through human design. So it's a brilliant system, and I'm so grateful to have it as a tool to use to help people. So a bit about my story. I was in the sort of not the academic world, but more I have two master's degrees, and I have an MBA, a business degree, and a master's in public administration. And I worked in government, and then I got my MBA, and I worked in the business field. I worked in cellular telecommunications. I was the first vice president of customer service for a non-wireline cellular telephone company, the Washington-Baltimore Cellular One. So I was doing really well in...
That's right. My husband worked for Cellular One around the time you worked there, and I do remember. I forgot that little.
Oh wow! Yes, it was an exciting, dynamic time, and I think one of the things I enjoyed so much about it was creating something new that had never really been done before. And so we were forging new ground. It was very exciting, and I worked like a demon. And then I started to burn out, and I ended up moving jobs. And one of the things I noticed about myself at the time, this was long before human design, was that when I was changing jobs, I always wanted some time off. It's like, other people were ready to like dive into their next job right away. I always wanted at least 2 weeks. A month would be great. Can I have like a month before I have to start my next job? That would be awesome. So, and no one else seemed to want that or need that. And I thought that was really curious. And I also noticed that when I was with large groups of people, like I did the landmark education work for a while. And when I'd be in a room with, 100 people or in communications course, several hundred people, I would come home after that and I would need at least a day to kind of recover. I would call in sick to work, and I didn't even want to listen to music or watch TV. I just wanted to sit quietly. And I thought, that's really weird. What's wrong with me? It doesn't make any sense. And then later, when I found out I was a projector and had open emotional solar plexus and a lot of open centers, it made enormous amounts of sense. But I was floating. I was drifting. I had done well, but I was burned out. And I also knew that there was something more that I could do and wanted to do to help people, but I had no idea what that was. So I was, flailing around and grabbing at straws, kind of trying to figure it out. I did some accounting work. I helped people with QuickBooks and Quicken. And then I came across a health coaching program. And that seemed interesting to me because I'd always been interested in health. And fortunately, one of the free teleclasses that was offered in this program was about EFT, the emotional freedom techniques. And so I was listening to that teleclass, and there were two people leading the class, Brad Yates, who apparently was well known in the EFT world, and a woman named Karen Curry. And this was back in 2008. And I was listening to them, and there was something about the way Karen spoke about life and people and what's possible. She just had this perspective that I'd never heard before. And it was calming, it was empowering. And I just felt like, wow, this woman knows things that I don't know and that I want to know, but I didn't know what they were. So I went to her website, and there was a whole section on her site about human design. And that had not been mentioned at all in the teleclass. Teleclass was only about EFT, but her site had this whole section on human design. So I'm reading it going, wow, that's interesting. Wow, that's really interesting. And so I requested my chart, and it took a few weeks, and I got my chart, and I looked at it, and I looked at this thing, and I went, oh, that's really ugly and angular and weird. And it doesn't tell me anything about me. And at the time, I was actually taking care of my mom, who was in late stage cancer. And so I just didn't have the time or the bandwidth to look into it any further. So I put it aside. And a few months later, my mom had passed, and I circled back around to it. And I read the report that came with it that said I was a projector. And I read that description. I went, wow, that makes a lot of sense about my life. And then I started getting into the whole invitations thing. And when I looked back, I realized that all the great jobs I'd had, actually pretty much all the jobs I'd ever had, I was invited into. And the very few times I was trying to get a job on my own, nothing, flat on my face. Despite stellar credentials, I just couldn't find a job to save myself at all. But the invitations, brilliant. So here I'm looking at this chart, I'm reading this description. And so I had a chart run for my partner, Charlie. Turns out he's a projector. I thought, oh, that's odd, because we're so different in so many ways. And I read the description of projector to him, and he went, wow, that really resonates. That makes sense. That makes sense of my life. I went, oh, I was surprised. And then I ran a chart for a friend who turned out to also be a projector. And I read the description to her, and she said, wow, that really describes my struggles. So I thought, wow, there's something to this. There's something here that actually makes sense. And so I started looking into it, and I signed up for Karen Curry's training program, which at the time was like a 9-month training program. It wasn't broken up into sections yet. It was all one great long program. And within a month or two in that program, I realized there was nothing I wanted to do on this planet more than continue to study the system and to help other people with it, because it had made such a profound difference in my life.
Wow. So that was in 2008 that you did the training too, or was that
it actually started, I think, January 2009.
Okay.
And it went through most of that year.
So I have to come in at a couple things that you said. So
yeah.
Well, that you had to wait 3 weeks or whatever to get your chart. And that was just 2008, right?
Right.
To people like me, that doesn't sound like that long ago, right? I mean, right. I have, I have probably some shoes that are older than that, right? But it's like to wait that long, and now it's like we can get our chart for free and second, and right. In many different forms and stuff. So, right. And then I also noticed that you said that when you saw your chart, you were like, ew, this doesn't resonate. And I remember hearing Karen Curry Parker talk about, and she was Karen Curry back then, not Parker,
yes. Right.
That how she talked about how when she first saw her chart, she was like,
she cried,
laid it on her chest, cried. So that's, really shows how different this all resonates with different people. And I've found that in talking to people, there are some people who, like, if they're looking at their chart, they're like this, they don't almost the reading, and other people, they're like, and so it's interesting. And I wonder if that's something we can see in the chart somewhere, but.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. I think everybody has their own, I had my expectations of, some great revelation of information, right. And the chart itself doesn't say much unless you know how to read it.
Yeah.
So, and that was frustrating. And back then there was very little information available online, very little. And so I was like hungry. It's like, I want to know more. I want to know more. I want to know more.
And I found that to be, well, there was a decent amount of information available. But when I found human design, or it found me 7 years ago, there was still a huge difference between what's available now. So, even Karen's content was very small compared to what it is now. So
Yes.
anyway, so you found human design, you started training in it in 2008, and then what happened?
I'm a 1-3 projector, so I'm investigative and experimental. So I need to understand it, I need to study it, I need to research it, and then I need to play with it and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And actually, when I discovered the 1-3, I remembered that when I worked for a company, a cellular related company, this was many years ago when the internet was coming on, and Microsoft had developed Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, and we were starting to use those in the office. I was fascinated with them, and I would literally take the manual home with me at night, and the manual was like 500-page book, and I would read a few chapters and take a whole bunch of notes. And then the next day I would go into the office and sit at the computer and play with it. Go, oh, that's what that looks like. Oh, that's what that meant. Oh, now I understand. So, I would research it, but then I had to play with it to see how it actually worked, to really get it so that I could use it. And then the next night I'd take the book home again and read another couple chapters and take a whole bunch of notes. And when I learned that I was a 1-3, I went, duh, that's exactly what a 1-3 does.
Right.
I research it and then I play with it and figure out what works and what doesn't work.
And don't you find then you'd go back and research again? Like I have a few clients that are 1-3s, and I've found that sometimes the experimenting, the playing with it is one of the major aspects of the research. Like seeing it doesn't work and then going in, doing investigating to see what to try next. I bet you Thomas Edison was a 1-3.
I'm sorry, say again?
I bet Thomas Edison was a 1-3.
Oh, I have no idea
about how he had to try all those different things. Light bulb work.
Right.
Yeah, like all those, a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, he must have been a third line. I don't know if it was a 1-3, but definitely a third line. I would think. So here it is. It's summer of 2009, and I'm partway through the training program, Karen's training program. And there is a holistic health fair that's coming in local town in the Daytona Beach area where I live. And I thought, maybe I should get a booth there and start sharing human design with people. That would be really interesting. But I thought, okay, but wait, I haven't been invited. How does that work? Okay, well, let me sort of get ready just in case. And I started, figuring out what I would do and how I would sort of set things up. And I lined up someone to maybe help me run charts. And I went to a potluck, local potluck of a sort of vegetarian group. And I was getting out of my car at the same time another lady was getting out of her car, and I'd met her before. And she turns out that she is the one who was organizing the holistic health fair. And so we chatted a little bit on our way into the door and said, what are you up to? And I started talking a little bit about human design. And then, we got in, and then there was, chaos and busyness and talking to people. And then we ended up next to each other in line to get food. And so I was telling her a little bit more about human design, and she looked at me, and this is the lady who's organizing this event. She looked me straight in the eye and she said, Evelyn, do you have a booth yet? And I said, no. And she said, you have to have a booth. I want you to have a booth. I went, oh my God, that was an invitation. That was an invitation from the person who has the authority to make that kind of invitation. That's how it works.
Right.
So I was really experiencing it as I was experiencing how it looks, how it works, how it feels as I was studying and learning about it. And so I did have a booth, and it went great. And I had booths after that, but I never had that same clear invitation, and they weren't as fun or as successful. So that invitation really, really nailed it. It was amazing. So I started sharing human design with people. And as a result, I started lining up some readings, even though I wasn't through the training yet. I'd studied, part of it, but we hadn't gotten to the gates and channels yet. We'd just done the few basics, like what would now be considered levels 1 and 2 with Karen. And I was already starting to book readings with people. And that was amazing because my conscious sun is activated, it activates the gate 48. And the gate 48 is the gate of depth. and the fear of being not ready and not knowing enough. And that had always held me back in life. It's like, oh, I don't know enough. I'm not ready. I don't feel comfortable with this. But here I was starting to book readings before I'd even finished the training. That was how powerful the commitment was and the connection to this information was for me, and how eager I was to get out there and start helping people with it. And I even did some mini readings, like, 5-10 minute readings during an expo. And people were astounded. This one lady looked at me and said, "Oh my God, I feel naked. How do you know all this stuff about me?" So I went, wow, I'm really onto something here. And so I've just gradually, slowly built my business, and then eventually wrote the book. But it took years before I was ready to write that book for Projectors.
Yeah.
And Karen, actually, Karen it's interesting because Karen had been inviting me for years. "Evelyn, you need to write a book for Projectors. Evelyn, please write a book for Projectors. Projectors need something and you can provide it." And I never felt ready. It's like, I had so much I wanted to say, I didn't even know where to begin. And I just felt like, oh, not yet. And then, when was it? 2021, I guess. Maybe it was 22. It was 22, early in 22. I had contracted with Grace Point Publishing to publish 3 short books I wanted to write about the fears of the spleen and the emotions of the solar plexus, and some things I'd been doing some blog posts about. And Michelle, who's Karen's partner in Grace Point publishing company, Michelle got in touch with me and said, "Evelyn, instead of these 3 short books, why don't you write a book on projectors for Projectors?" Right. And there was something about the timing of that. So we talked a little bit about it. And then, like, maybe an hour later, and I love Michelle. She hasn't studied human design, but she spent so much time with Karen that she understands the basics. And she sent me an email that said, "Evelyn, I invite you to write a projector book, period." Right. And that was the entire email. And I'm splenic in my authority, and my spleen went, yes. My whole, when I get a strong yes, my whole body just kind of vibrates. And it was the right time. I wasn't ready until then. And the prior invitations hadn't done it yet because I wasn't ready. But when I was ready, and literally within 24 hours, the entire outline of the book poured out of me onto a page, and it didn't change at all. All I needed to do was fill it in.
So, okay. So I want to ask about the splenic response. And so I'm going to put that a note for later, because what I really want to go into right now is this being not being ready. Yeah. And wondering if, while you weren't ready, were there points where you felt like you got caught in that bitterness that we often hear so much about, and some of us as projectors spend a lot of time kind of stuck in, because we want something to happen now, but we're not ready, and we get caught up in the bitterness of not getting the invitation instead of that. Mm-hmm. You sound like you've been in the flow in what you described, but I'm wondering.
I don't think I experienced bitterness about that. I knew I wasn't ready, and there was frustration there with myself, but it wasn't bitterness because I was being invited. Right. It wasn't that I wasn't being recognized or invited. I was, but I just didn't feel ready.
Just in general, though, is there a time where you can think of during this journey where you were in that bitterness for a while, or not? Why do you think that has been?
Yeah, it was probably sort of bitterness with myself.
Yeah.
That, you've helped a lot of people, enough, a lot already. Why can't you figure out how to get it together to write a book? Why are you so hesitant? Why won't you step forward and share and make a difference that you can make? So I was angry with myself, frustrated, and maybe just bitter that I don't have the same energy. And, you know, as I was building my business, I was watching Karen build her business and always feeling less than. It's like, oh my God, she does so much. I barely do, in 1 year, what she gets done in 1 month. And I remember resenting that, feeling bitter that why is this so hard for me? And I knew I was a projector and she was a manifesting generator. It's like, duh. But there was still this part of me because I have business background and training and I have an MBA. It's like, why can't I do this? Why can't I just, make it happen? Like, duh, I'm not supposed to make it happen. It's not how I'm wired.
I had wanted to share your chart and just technology issues glitched and I didn't get it in there and I didn't get it up there, but I have it and I've seen it, but it's somewhere in my ajna. So my open ajna, remind me and let everyone else know which channels do you have? And because you're a splenic projector, so you have your spleen defined via what?
Via 2 channels, the channel of ambition, the 5432 from the root to the spleen, and the channel of struggle, the 3828. So those 2. Yes.
You've had a lot of that root pressure.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's defined root, but yeah, a lot of root energy.
That pulsing to the spleen, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then from the ajna to the throat, I have the 1156.
Right. Okay.
So I have defined ajna and throat and defined root and spleen, and everything else is open. And actually my solar plexus center is completely open, no hanging gates at all.
Yeah. Okay. So, so you have those 4 centers defined.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So, and if those of you, I will later put the chart in here if you're visual and people want to see her chart, what we're talking about, but that just helps me to kind of remember some stuff. So, I want to talk a little bit about being a splenic projector. We talked last week with Shannon Dew, who is splenic manifester. And so she talked a little bit about it, but you talked about your spleen saying yes. And I have heard some people say that the spleen only says no. Mm-hmm. And I do not claim to have that knowledge because I do have a defined spleen. I have my spleen defined from the 2644, which is from the, just for those who aren't, from the will center to the spleen. And so I have that awareness of when my spleen kind of has told me don't do that and I've ignored it and then not good stuff has happened. But I don't know when I feel the yeses, if that's coming from my spleen or what. I am emotional, so I can't trust it in the now anyway for the yeses. Right. So if you can speak a little bit about how you understand your splenic authorities.
Right. Well, I can speak not only from my own experience, but from having done hundreds and hundreds of readings with people, many of whom are splenic. And the spleen is all about survival, and it's all about protection. It's about the immune system. It's our well-being. It's our physical well-being. And so the splenic response is always from the perspective of, is this safe for me? Is this healthy for me? And ultimately, is it aligned for me? But it's really about protecting you. Your spleen wants to protect you so that you survive. And so it's always coming from that point of view, that perspective. And I've met many splenics who say, like you do, I feel a strong no, but rarely do I feel a yes. That's just its way of protecting. But I tend to not feel very strong no's. I feel more yeses, and I've had a lot of clients who feel a strong yes with splenic. So it really varies, and it's quiet and it's quick. And I've learned to tune myself to feel for it and listen for it so that it can guide me. And it's become easier and easier. It's like a muscle, you just get better at it with practice. And so, but even when it's not just protection, it's like one time I have this weird thing about lamps. Most lamps I just can't stand. But I found this one lampshade one time, a long time ago, and I picked it up. It was in a shop, and I picked it up and I just hugged it to my chest as I walked around the rest of the store looking at things. Like it was just an instant whole body. Yes, I want that. And I sort of assumed that was splenic. It wasn't that I was under threat or was protecting me, but I just had this strong, full body sense of, yes, I want that.
Huh. Okay. That's interesting. So now if you're talking to someone who says, I don't feel my splenic response, I don't nothing, how would you tell them to try to get in tune with that?
Really making an intentional effort in moments of opportunity for a response to really pay attention to it, because it's already always happening. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of tuning into it. So it's not like you have to remember to have a splenic reaction. It's instant. You just need to remember to tune in and feel for, okay, what was that feeling? Was it a positive? Was it a yes? Was it, does it feel safe, or was it a no?
Yeah.
And it's just practice, like being a screen, not a sponge with your open centers. It's just practice. So I say, tattoo it on the back of your hand if you need to, whatever you need to do to remind you to get into the habit and practice of paying attention to it.
Yeah. So, I want to go back a little bit to the, projector and the bitterness thing, because I just think it's remarkable. Whenever I've talked to you, I've never gotten a sense of, that projector bitterness that is so common when you go into, there's tons of different Facebook groups for all different types. And you have your group, which is the Empowered Projector, which is a wonderful group. If you're projectors out there, I highly recommend the group. But there's so many posts of people just complaining about how much they hate being a projector and how they're sick of waiting, and they're kind of in this victim mode. And I'm sure you've met people like that and you've experienced that. And I'm wondering if you can just speak to that and talk maybe about why that you never felt that happened with you, because you didn't have you to learn from.
Right. That's true. And it's not that I've never felt bitter. I certainly have, but it hasn't been a major theme. I think I've been lucky in so many ways as a projector that I haven't had a lot of the financial struggles that a lot of projectors have. I was invited into great jobs, and I've just been able to kind of chart my path my own way without having a lot of struggle. So I've been, knock on wood, and very grateful about that. But bitterness is pretty common. When I work with my projector clients, often they don't seem bitter either, but I'll say, well, let's talk a little bit about bitterness. What's that like for you? Oh yeah, bitterness. Yes. So it's a pretty common experience with projectors. And it's common for projectors when they discover their projector to be unhappy about it and upset about it. I know projectors cried for days when they discovered they were a projector. It's like they feel like they got the short end of the stick. And I think that's a large reason why I wanted to write this book, and to help people understand, help projectors understand that we are designed for a specific role and a specific purpose. And when we are doing that, we are at our best and we are fulfilling our potential. But we live in a world that is dominated by generators and manifesting generators. And because they dominate, they sort of set the stage, they set the tone, they set the expectations that we're not designed to keep up with, but we're in the soup. Sort of in this generator soup that we need to swim through to make life happen. And the world is just not designed to support us and recognize us at this time. So it's like we're up against it, and it's challenging. And when we compare ourselves to others, we feel like we fall short. And so we blame ourselves, and we feel bad, and we feel guilty, and we feel angry, and we feel frustrated, and we get bitter. The bitterness often starts with, it's not fair. Like, it's not fair that I just tried to help that person and she bit my head off. It's not fair that, I'm trying to do the same thing this other person is doing and it's not working for me. It's working for her. She's doing, her business is growing and mine is stagnant. Why? I'm working so hard at this. Why isn't it working? And so that it's not fair leads into resentment, and then resentment spirals down into full-blown bitterness.
Yeah. And, for me, one of the things that I felt that I think sometimes made me bitter too was because I'm an energy projector. I have all the motors except the sacral defined. Mm-hmm. And, with that open head and ajna and not knowing when enough is enough in my sacral, those are my only 3 centers that are not defined. Mm. So what was to happen is I kept thinking I would learn my way into being a projector. I would figure it all out in my head, mm-hmm. and I would know what to do. But there would become this thing where I would just, I would have the energy to do because I have all these other motors. But I still couldn't do it in the way that, like, I didn't understand. How can I be the person who can outwork anybody? I'm that person who I had to stop going to the gym because I was so competitive that I would come home and I'd go work out and they'd do suicides or something. And I'm not in great shape. I would kill myself to not be the last person. And, and so then I'd come home and all I'd want to do is eat everything in sight and lay on the couch all day. I'd have no energy. So I would have energy in the moment, then I'd have none. And then I'd just be bitter because why does this work? I'm doing what they're all saying, but it doesn't work that way for me, whether it was working out, whether it's working a job. And yes, the jobs I was invited to worked great, but any other job where I tried to assert myself and do all those things, but it didn't feel like it was a lack of energy with me because I had, you know what I mean? So I got in this whole head for a long time, stuck in my head, why this doesn't make sense. So, yeah. So I don't.
Yeah, the energy thing is really tricky because you have these motors defined, but none of them, of course, get to the throat, because if they got to the throat, you'd be a manifester. So, and I've talked to a lot of 3 motors projectors. I've even talked to a lot of 4 motors generators who have an open throat. And with all those motors, but no motor to the throat, it's kind of like you're sitting at a traffic light, at a red light, and you've got plenty of gas, you've got plenty of motor power in your vehicle, and the light turns green, and you put your foot on the gas, and you want to go. You've got all this motor power, but it's like your wheels are spinning, and it's hard to get forward momentum. It's hard to get traction without a motor to the throat. And so, you don't have full access to your motor energy just by yourself.
I wish I had better mechanical knowledge because know Ellen Hefty's watching and she would be able to really use this with her. She does the vehicles as an analogy. And I'm like, is that the clutch? What is it that is building? Something like that. I'm not sure if I know my mechanics well enough. Yeah, that make the wheels engage.
So when you were going to the gym, you were around a lot of sacral energy that you're taking in and amplifying. You get home and you probably don't have that around. And of course, you've exhausted yourself physically. So yes, you've got zero energy. Interestingly, I've done a lot of readings for no motors projectors, and they seem to have an extraordinary amount of energy, more energy sustainably than a lot of the motor projectors that I've met. And I'm not exactly sure where that comes from. It's kind of like the motors don't slow them down.
Well, that makes a little bit of sense because, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, I have the root pulse that has to be engaged, and I have the wheel that has to be rested for it to work. And then I have the solar plexus that is dependent on the wave. But if all those are open and you're just amplifying the motors around you, you can actually take in that energy.
Right. Exactly. I've noticed that even when they're on their own, even when they're alone, they seem to have energy. They seem to, pull it in from the ethers or something. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but they have remarkable energy for the most part, not everyone, of course, but a lot of no motus projectors have enormous energy. And that's really encouraging, I think, because people, a lot of projectors say, well, I'm not sustainable. This is the main reason I wrote the book. That being told that you're not sustainable in today's world is like, well, how am I supposed to function in today's life if I'm not sustainable? It felt like a prison sentence or, a punishment. And when we realize that we have energy, it just works differently than others. And of course, we have basic energy for doing life. It's the recognition and invitations from outside of us that bring additional energy to us that then allows us to take action in a project or whatever we've been invited into. So the recognition and invitation brings energy that allows us to fulfill whatever we're moving into, assuming that our authority said, yes, I want to do that. Yes, that's aligned for me. And without that, we have sort of basic energy. But if we're exhausting ourselves trying to keep up with the rest of the world, then that drains our energy and we end up needing a lot of rest. And burnout, of course, is very challenging to recover from. I always tell my clients, it may not seem easy in the moment, but it's much easier to avoid burnout than it is to recover from burnout. And if you are in burnout, your number one job, your only job is to recover from burnout because nothing else will work if you're still in burnout.
Yeah. And that's really hard though, when I can think of a couple projectors I know who are kind of in financial survival mode.
Yeah.
So, but they have burnout. And so trying to heal in a way that will draw incorrect invitations, yet still, not wind up on the streets, and have food to eat.
Exactly.
And so I'm wondering what sort of advice, I know that's a very general question that probably has a more specific answers based on people, but if there's something just in general that comes to mind that you tell people when they're in that sort of situation.
I'm a pragmatist. And, as much as we say when human design, you have to wait for an invitation. First of all, I say, we can take action without invitations. Invitations help, but, there are no projector police out there that are going to smack our hand if we try to do something without an invitation.
Well, there's some in some of the groups.
I know. That's why I was really clear in my book. It's like, not all human design people agree with me, but this is my perspective and this is my experience personally and with clients that, we can take action. It may not work great, but, and it may work better if we wait for an invitation. But the last thing I think is useful on the planet is for all these powerful, amazing projectors to be sitting on their hands, waiting, doing nothing, saying, I'm not supposed to do anything without an invitation. Like, no, if it feels aligned, take action and then see what happens. Have realistic expectations about it. It may not work smoothly, but, and invitations are worth waiting for, but you don't have to do nothing while you're waiting. You can be empowered while you're waiting.
Right.
So I wanted to circle back. Where was we? Where were we? Where was we? Where were we? My brain works so fast sometimes that I lose track of where I was.
We were talking about like when somebody is in a position where they can't pay the bills and
Yes.
They are burned out. They have that, they've been trying to operate their whole life as a generator type. And now they're like,
Right.
Where do you start?
So yeah, I'm a pragmatist. I mean, do what you got to do, do it with the understanding that it's not ideal, and do whatever you can around the edges to take as good care of yourself to heal. And as much as possible, leverage whatever you can. When projector clients say, they want to start a new business, they want to become a coach, or they want to start a business, I always tell them, imagine the easiest way that could come about, the easiest way that could unfold. What would that look like? What would that feel like? How could it be like easy, like floating downstream, like no effort? What would that look like and feel like? And sort of seed the universe with that, like Karen says, seed the universe, put that out there without any contradicting thoughts, and see what happens. But also in that vein, like, who do you know who maybe could help you? Who do you know who could refer clients to you? Or maybe if they want to do coaching, for example, can you work for someone else who already has a business going so that you don't have to do all of the effort to create a business from scratch? because as projectors, we want to just be able to step in and do our brilliance.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of the invitation. Is an invitation implies that there's already something existing going on, or they're inviting you to create, to help them create something, but there's already some momentum, some movement, some energy behind it that you can step into and then do your brilliance and not have to do all the grunt work of making it possible and making it happen in the first place. So, if you are in a desperate situation, figure out whatever leverage you can apply and however you can, use other people's support. Don't be afraid to ask for support. Don't be afraid to say, what the situation is, and get some support from the people around you who love you and care about you and who can do something to help you. And the other thing about not just being passive and waiting for an invitation is how useful it is to be visible as a projector, to be out there, to let people know who you are, what you're up to, what you're looking for, in a non-pushy way, in a gentle way, because pushy doesn't work for projectors, but letting people know. I call it being invitable.
Right.
You need to make sure that people know who you are so they can invite you, know what you do so they can invite you into the right thing, and know how to find you so they can find you to invite you. You need to make it easy for them to be invitable. And that's attitude as well. Bitterness is understandable, but it's very repelling. Nobody wants to invite someone who's bitter. So you need to figure out how to manage that bitterness and kind of climb out of that slippery slope of bitterness so that you can be invitable, findable, and invitable.
Yeah. It's really funny how that works too, because I notice when I'm in I haven't definitely, I have that individual 3955 emotional wave, that channel of emoting. It's like a channel of moodiness, right? I mean, that's me. And it's funny how that is not just when you're with me. Like, I notice when I'm kind of in a bit of a funk, like the world goes really quiet for me. And then I'll feel better and I won't even put anything out there. And all of a sudden people are tagging me in Facebook groups and recommending me and talking about things. And I'm like, isn't that funny how my aura just all of a sudden is right? It's supercharged. But I want to hear what you're saying, but I also want to remind people that, if you're watching, we've got another 15 minutes or so. So if anybody has any questions for Evelyn, please put them in the comments and I'm going to look and see if I missed anything. I don't see anything here, but there are a couple that just some people say they're watching, but I had someone say, Lynn says, Grand Rising, blessings, lady. But if anybody has any questions, I'd really love to see those come up so we have a couple minutes to get to that. But if you want to speak to what I was just saying, if I didn't ramble too much.
Well, I did want to speak to bitterness a little more. Can we do that?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So bitterness it's understandable. You want to avoid it if you can, but it's also a red flag that lets you know that there's something off in the way you're interpreting and perceiving the world around you and what's happening to you. So it's a good indicator that you want to look at, okay, what am I thinking or doing or saying or believing that isn't aligned for me, that is leading me to feel this bitterness? Because that's your leverage point of saying, okay, this is where I need to shift. And often it's mindset. It's I need to shift my mindset so that I'm interpreting things a little differently. The other aspect of bitterness that I think is not often recognized is that it's potentially self-protection. When you can see, oh, wait a minute, when you're bitter, you're pushing people away. And in pushing people away, you're protecting yourself from further hurt, from further frustration, from further feeling awful about yourself or comparison or people criticizing you or whatever's going on. It's you're building this wall to kind of protect yourself from being further hurt. And when you recognize that, it's oh, okay, so why do I need to protect myself? What's going on that I'm feeling this unconscious need to protect myself and put up that boundary, that barrier that will keep people away. And maybe you need to keep people away until you heal. But again, the bitterness repels people in a way that doesn't serve you in the longer term. So, right. If you're doing that, hopefully it'll be temporary and it'll serve its function for you. And then you can climb out of that and come back up into the rest of the world and again, be findable and invitable and offer your brilliance.
Yeah. So that's really huge. That makes a lot of sense to me, that it protects us from, it kind of stops us from continuing to go down the wrong path, right?
In a way, yeah.
Have the wrong people like pushing us, like, because what I've noticed is when I get in bitterness, nobody wants to talk to me anyway. So they don't have the influence on me that maybe they weren't supposed to have because they're not around. And sometimes I find when we're talking about creating things in a way that's sustainable, like a business that's findable and stuff, I know in my head, and not just in my head, in the people around me, a lot of times I have people saying, oh, well, you should create this and you should do this and you should do a webinar and you should do all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I just go, I'm so tired thinking about that because none of that lights me up to make. I'm like, I don't need to recreate the wheel. And that's why I'll send people to join. I have affiliate links that it's nice to get a little bit of a financial benefit that way, but I will send people to do professional training with Karen, or there's other people that I like as well, but don't have the affiliate links with, but Karen's my favorite for sure. But if it doesn't suit someone, I'll send somebody in a different direction, or I'll send somebody to your website for, information that I haven't produced because I just don't feel the need to make something that's already out there, right? Just so that I can say it has my name on it, right?
Right. Yeah, we need to do what's correct for us. And all of the business coaching and advice and mentoring and all that, we still, especially as projectors, but really all types, you need to filter what other people are telling you through what you know about yourself and what you know is true about yourself, what you know works for yourself, and of course, through your strategy and authority.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I really like to ask guests is there something specific in how you talk about yourself that you felt really shifted once you understood your human design? Like, how has that caused you to change your narrative of who you are?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't talk about myself a lot, so which maybe is a projector thing.
I talk about myself a lot, but I think that's a 1/8 thing. So
yeah, maybe
I have that.
Yes, right. What I do know is that it has shifted how I perceive my role in the world, and it has allowed me to feel good about what I do and the contribution that I make in the context of who I am and who I'm designed to be. And it's given me a lot more self-confidence. It's given me a lot more self-trust. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to sort of navigate my path in a way knowing what's true for me. And finally relaxing away from trying to be like Karen and realizing, come on, Evelyn, you're not designed like her. You will never do that. And you're not supposed to. You have a different role to play. And when I step into that and stop comparing and stop trying to be like others, it has allowed me to be true to myself. And in that, I'm able to shine. And in that, I'm able to, I think, guide and lead people and sort of lead by example. People say, oh, well, she's sort of following what's true for her. Maybe I can do that too. For example, when, I do readings, I have always, from the beginning, scheduled 2 days a week for readings. I do a bunch of readings on those days, but I don't fill my schedule with readings because I would burn out. And I tried that once actually, and I really did burn out. So I hold to my boundaries pretty carefully, knowing who I am and knowing my energy and knowing what works for me and what doesn't. So it has allowed me to, be a fuller expression of who I am and write a book and give talks. And I was always shy. The thought of, public speaking, if you had told me 15 years ago that I would be doing this, I'd say, oh no, you're crazy. I would never do that. But when the energy is right, when the timing is right, and when the alignment is right, it's easy to step in when you have the confidence that you're stepping in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really amazing how, when you really start to understand the nuances, because you and I are both projectors, but our designs are so very different.
Right.
And I've always been very extroverted. But for me, it's this big thing of having to learn not to use so much energy to try to get the recognition, and that's where a lot of my conditioning came in. I'm the youngest of 9 kids, and you basically, had to fight for any attention you got, so, right. So, and it's really, and like I said, I have a lot of definition that could easily, like, I'm a 1 gate away from being a manifesting generator in many ways, right?
Right.
And 1 gate away from being a manifester in ways. There's so many ways that I can easily feel that, and I do have a ton of initiating energy, and I have that defined will, and the G center to the throat channel so I very much am here to speak from a place of I am. That's cool.
Right.
So, but finding that I'm not for everyone, and not trying to make that be something to fix,
right,
for me has been the huge thing. Yes. About being a projector. Like, I'm always going to probably talk more than you. And I know that as a projector, there are some people who say you're not even supposed to speak until spoken to. And I don't know if I'll ever be that person. I'm always going to be the person who offers to help somebody at the grocery store, but what I've learned to do is to not take it personally when they don't want that.
Right.
And so I can sense when someone is not responsive to my initiating, right, in a way that I don't take it as something I need to keep pushing. Right.
Yeah. And to offer to help and see their reaction. That's something that really helps for projectors. It's like you have this wisdom, you have this perception of how it could work better or how you could help them. But if they're not asking, you want to be gentle with kind of asking for permission to speak, essentially, saying something like, well, I have some experience about this that might be helpful. Would you be interested in hearing about it? Or may I share it with you? Or, would you listen? Just something where you're essentially asking for permission to speak and wording it as a yes or no question. And that will then get their attention and allow them to respond and see if they're really interested. And if they are, then you have what I call an energetic opening to speak into with them, where they'll hear you and value what you have to say. But if they're not interested, if they're distracted, or no, it's not a good time, or I'm busy, or, then you don't have that opening. And so they're not going to hear you anyway. The tricky part with that is if they say yes, but they're just being polite and they don't really mean it, but you'll feel that. And then you don't have that energetic opening to speak into with that person. Yeah. Yeah. So even just saying things like, can I help you with that? Or can I get the door for you? Even as a projector, sometimes I find that it's like even something simple like opening a door feels weird to some people, right? Can I get? Yes.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
Right.
Yes.
We don't have that it's that motorized throat. It's so weird. Everyone thinks it's just about what you say.
Right.
But
it's making things happen in the world.
Before we go, I just want to say, read a couple comments. So Lynn says, certainly could resonate with anyone. I had to be informed I was doing it. Didn't realize I was doing the bitterness thing. Definitely was from childhood conditioning. And then she later says, yes, agree. HD has been pivotal to realizations of why I do what I do by design. So
nice.
Those are, So I guess we don't have any questions. I guess we've just answered them all. But
there is one last point that I'd like to drive home for projectors,
Absolutely.
and that is recognition is really valuable for us. I call it sometimes our lifeblood. It provides energy for taking action for projects and things that we're invited into, but it is not related to our self-value.
Yes.
We need to stand in our own self-value, regardless of whether we're being recognized or invited. And it's sadly easy for projectors, especially the way a lot of projector material is written and explained, that, if we're not getting recognition and invitation, then there's something wrong. And we tend to take it personally. It's like, oh, I'm not being recognized. Maybe I don't, I'm not valuable. I don't have anything to say. I'm not helpful. Otherwise I'd be being recognized. And we want to distinguish those two as not being related. You're not dependent on external recognition from others in order to feel good about yourself. It's an inside job. You need to stand strong in who you are and feel good about yourself. And I've come to the point where, if I'm not being recognized, like if I did something great in the yard and my partner goes, oh yeah, that looks nice. I go, Evelyn, good job. That looks awesome. Right? You did an amazing job. I recognize myself, if I'm not getting it. Yes. It's not from the outside. I do it for me.
That's a really great point. And I love the idea of ending on that note. But I think it's also true that applies to everyone. Because if we don't recognize our own value just by being, right?
Yes.
Everybody. And we do this thing in society where we hear something bad about that somebody did something that we don't agree with. And so now we've negated their value as a human being, and we can't like that person. We have to unfollow them, whatever it is. So we tend to, I have a t-shirt from, that I got at the Legacy Museum it's the legacy of slavery. And this is related to the criminal justice thing, but it says it's from Brian Stevenson.
Oh, I love him. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And it says each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. And I think for all of us, when we can heal our idea that our worth comes from our actions,
right?
And realize that we all have things we're here to learn from, and some of those things are mistakes, right?
Right.
So especially at the third line, when you have that idea that you did something wrong, and so somehow that affects your value. I mean, it's just so not true. And there are many things in my life that I stopped doing because nobody else was recognizing them as valuable. And they were things I really enjoyed, and, and then we're just giving away parts of ourselves. So I think that that's a lesson that can apply to any type,
we set the bar for how other people treat us by how we treat ourselves.
Yes.
And it is an inside job. We need to set that bar so that other people see, oh, that's how she needs to be treated. That's how it's appropriate to treat her because I see how she treats herself. And then you become a beacon and a guide and an example for others to follow as well.
Yes. Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. And I love that you're a part of this group. I know you're busy, but if you have time to check on the comments later, I'm sure there might be some things that come up.
Sure.
And I don't see any other questions. Let me do one last here. I don't see. Nope. Okay. So thanks again. And I'm going to end this live. And like I said, if you have questions, folks, just go ahead and put them in the, that's not the right thing here. Wait, end live. Okay.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Awesome.